To get started, what is ping post? The definition that I use is that ping post is the process of a lead seller sending partial non-contact information to a lead buyer, giving them the opportunity to bid on that lead and before the full lead details are sent to that partner. So it is the process of a seller sending partial information and then only sending the full details to the winner. This process can obviously have a lot of companies or entities in that flow between the generator of the lead and the ultimate seller of the lead. And typically they get involved, and that is where things like margin come into play. In terms of what is sent on a ping, that is going to depend. So it depends on the vertical, it depends on the vendor, and it depends on what the buyer requires. So in many lead types, there's pretty consistent requirements as far as what is pinged across. But then in other verticals, it is much more variable. Different buyers may require things like incident date in a legal vertical where others may not. And then if you look at health insurance, income may be something that some require and others do not. In general, you're going to have your geo, the zip code typically, which is pinged over. The age, if that is part of the lead type, is also a big determining factor. And then again, those lead type specific fields. That's something from a buyer side, it is what fields you want to make a business decision on that incoming ping. So if you want to make a decision on something that is not being pinged, you can ask for that or have that vendor establish a default value. Similarly, from the seller's point of view, you can determine what you are pinging out to the buyers, make that consistent across the board, and then address any exceptions or that are by the lead buyer. So the next question then, of course, is what is sent on the post? What is sent on the post is the rest of the information. Typically, that is PII, or personal identifiable information, the name, address, phone number, email of the lead itself. But it may essentially include anything that is not sent on the ping. There can be some ambiguity. So for example, trusted form or Jernaya. Is that sent on the ping? Is that sent on the post? That is something that there is not a general consensus that I'm aware of in the industry. Some companies will send it, some do not. And then some of those products have the opportunity to send masked values. So really, from a seller's point of view, you have to take evaluation of what your buyers require so that you can fulfill that. And then from the buyer side, do you need that information on the ping, or is that something that's sufficient to be sent on the post, because that's where you're going to be doing your claiming of those certificates anyway. So that kind of leads into the next part, which is, when is that transaction complete? When is the ping post process complete? If we kind of get out of the slideshow here and we jump into some of these infographics here. So a vendor pings that partial non-contact information to your boberdoo system. You in turn then evaluate that ping. Does it match any partners in the system that are active, have available funds, and a matching filter set? If the answer there is yes, that is where the opportunity exists to carve out a profit margin, either based on the filter set or based on the source level, and then return the rest to the vendor as your represented bid. Now, if that bid is accepted by the vendor, typically meaning it's the highest price in their ping tree. They would post the full lead details into your boberdoo system. Your boberdoo system then delivers the final lead post to the partner and waits for that success response before returning the matched response to your vendor. So it's important to know that that is a sequential process, because if there is any breaks along that process in the post, that is where post rejects occur. And we'll talk a little bit more about those here in a second. So we're going to kind of go to the next one, potential outcomes on the ping, potential outcomes on the post. We talked a little bit about it, but specific to boberdoo. So when a ping comes in from a vendor to the boberdoo system, we are talking about the left side of this infographic here. The potential responses are matched, unmatched, or error. Error is pretty self-explanatory. The vendor didn't send something that was required by you, or they sent it incorrectly. They need to try again. Matched means that the system essentially was able to go through this routing process, eliminate any non-active, not available partners without available funds and partners without a matching filter set, sort multiple matches, and then determine if the post comes in, who is that matched partner and filter set that it would be sent to. Now we have unmatched. Unmatched means that when the system was going through that decisioning process, when we got to this step here, we excluded all of the partners in the system. So therefore, a matched response comes in. That brings us to then those potential outcomes on the post that we were just talking about. So along the way, when you return the matched response back to the seller, that means that the transaction is successful and complete. And unmatched is where we get into post rejects. What that means is when the full lead details came into step one, we excluded additional partners, typically their filter sets, that were included on the ping. So that means either they sent additional fields that caused the filter set to exclude. That's very common. Another one is a duplicate. So the lead comes in and it's and attempts to sell to your partner. Your partner rejects that lead as a duplicate. Then your system rejects that lead back as a duplicate, post rejects that lead. Or a duplicate coming into your system. So those are all potentials. The other big one would be lead scoring. So with things like our outside services, you can make third-party calls to APIs for things like lead scoring, DNC check, and then post reject the leads at that stage. And then finally, the error that is going to be, there is something wrong with that post. The lead ID was not included, they did not configure that post correctly, or they're missing fields that are required by you to accept that lead. And so if we go into the leads tab here, this is kind of the net result. Obviously, the lead type is really dependent on what you're operating, but the process is the same. We have pings that come in that have bids, pings that come in that do not have any from different sources. And these logs essentially go through what I've just described.